welcome. We are starting with about 10 minutes late, but let's start as last time with a small prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Our Lady of Peace, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So today I would like to talk about a topic which is actually very interesting for us living in societies where people do not share the same faith. It's dialogue, friendship, and renewed encounter. And this is actually the title of a passage from Fratelli, tutti. The Pope himself says something about it, since it is too important, and he is not the first Pope to talk about it. He is not the first one in the church to feel, I would say, the need of deepening those topics that are important for building a more peaceful society: dialogue, friendship, and renewed encounter. And we have Nostra Aetate, which is a document from the church, which also is a bit about the relation between the Catholic Church and the non-Christian religions, because there is already a kind of relationship which is built between the Catholic Church and the other churches that are not Catholic but that are Christian. So Christianity, inside Christianity itself, you may find some differences, and we are also invited to not only look at those who share exactly our faith, those who are Catholic, but in order to build a society where friendship prevails, we need to be a bit open. In which way, we are going to see how. So dialogue is actually important in the society. And it is, as I said, a way of building a fraternal society, of living together. When we do not dialogue with someone, even in the same house, right? When you live with your flatmates and so on, if there is no dialogue, I'm not sure this, I would say, relation will last. It won't last, even in the place you work, at school, and so on. Our relationships can last only when a true dialogue exists, when we can speak with one another, when we can share our feelings, when we can say, for example, that in this area I do not agree with what is going on, and in this area this is maybe my opinion, and so on. So this is possible, and this is to be sustained, and so on. Otherwise, how can fraternity be possible if that was not the case? But what is dialogue and what dialogue is not? We may also sometimes not understand well what dialogue is. So first of all, in this encyclical, the Pope says that dialogue does not mean the share of our opinions on social media. Now we know that it exists, and it is one of the means that people use to get in touch with one another and so on when they are living in different places, when they can't see each other. Social media are there, so they have that positive side. Even in evangelization, right, you can use social media to talk about your faith. You can use it to evangelize and so on, and it is an area which needs to be evangelized. And that is why it is important that Christian faith or Christian doctrine may also be present on social media. But dialogue is not only linked to sharing our opinions through social media or based on social media. So it does not consist only of sharing our political or philosophical opinions and doctrines and so on. It may be important. It is important to have political doctrines, to have political point of views, and if that was not the case, it would not be good either to live in a society, to have neighbors that may not share our political point of views, but that are still our brothers and sisters. And this is sometimes not easy because our passions and so on may lead to disturbing those relationships. In some countries it is very complicated. When it is the period before elections, for example, it is not easy actually, because people may fight against each other because of some political differences and so on. But it's a sign of maturity, I think, to go beyond those differences, to be able to consider the other person as being a brother or a sister, even though that person do not share the same point of view as I do, even though that person do not support, for example, the same political leader and so on. This is a sign of maturity, and I would say that this encyclical is finally inviting us to go beyond all of those differences that can prevent us from being with one another and so on. Now that we have said this, we may also have a look at the consequences when there is no dialogue. When there is no dialogue, what can happen? Sometimes when there is no dialogue at all, it maybe depends on the situation, on the areas and so on. But most of the time, it may also lead to relativism. You know what relativism is? Saying that there exists a kind of difference between the objective truth and the relative one. The truth may exist, okay, but there is the objective one which exists, but there is also another one which is maybe different from the first one, but which also exists. So relativism makes these differences, those kind of distinctions between objective truth and relative truth. So the first one, as I said, is linked to the existing things. For example, an object, a mobile phone that I use, a car, a table, a computer that I am using now to give this talk, and so on. Those things exist. They exist. We can't see them. We can't experience them. We can't touch them, and so on. They exist, objectively speaking. But sometimes also, not even sometimes, but it may exist, according to those who think that relativism is something which is trustworthy, what they call relative truth. For example, a person exists. That person is in front of me. I will take your example. Lisa exists. So Lisa is to someone else a daughter, for example, to someone else a colleague. You see, it depends on who is speaking. And you have friends, you have colleagues, you have your sisters, your brothers, maybe. You have also people that you know, the parishioners that you know, and so on. So the relationships that exist between you and those people are not the same. So in that area, people will say that there exists an objective truth, because even though Lisa exists, this is something which is objective, right? But Lisa is not to me what she is to someone else, or she is not to that person what she is to another person. So this is a relative truth that can also exist. But here, this example, I would say it is obvious. We may all agree on it, but when it is extended to other areas, in that case, it may be a bit disturbing. When it is extended to other areas in life, it may be a bit disturbing. So we may, for example, all agree on the idea of respect, solidarity, moral values, such as modesty, chastity also, and so on. We may all agree on that. We may all think that all of those values are good. This is something which may be objective. But if there is no objective reference, if there is no objective truth, we may only agree on the idea of those values, but not on what they are concretely, not on what they mean concretely. So the way one expresses them may be different from the way another person expresses them. So the meaning may be different, the content, I would say, the content may be different, even though the idea is the same, respect. Okay, everyone knows that respect is a good value and so on, but how to show respect, it may be different, and this is one of the examples, but sometimes it may be a bit disturbing depending on the area. So if there is no dialogue, this may be one of the consequences that we may experience to make those kind of distinctions between what objectively exists and the way I perceive what exists. I may perceive it in a different way, and that can be considered as something which is objective for me. But it may not be objective, but for me it is. So and that is why the church most of the time says beware of relativism. Beware of relativism, chiefly moral relativism, which can lead to, I would say, many disturbing, it can be behaviors and so on in the society, which can even prevent solidarity and fraternity to prevail, to be finally leading people in the society. And I am going to talk about now something that Pope Francis said about relativism, and also the former Pope Benedict XVI, to just shed light on the fact that it may be a bit difficult to not be aware, to not be aware of those risks. So Pope Francis, for example, says this in Laudato Si, that he wrote a few years ago. He says this: in the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, I noted that the practical relativism typical to our age is even more dangerous than doctrinal relativism. When human beings place themselves at the center, they give absolute priority to immediate convenience, and all else becomes relative. Hence, we should not be surprised to find, in conjunction with the omnipresent technocratic paradigm and the cult of unlimited human power, the rise of a relativism which sees everything as irrelevant unless it serves one's own immediate interests. There is a logic in all this whereby different attitudes can feed on one another, leading to environmental degradation and social decay. So this is what the Pope said in this encyclical, that when men finally put themselves at the center, everything else becomes irrelevant unless it serves their own immediate interest, and so on. And the former Pope Benedict XVI also said he had already denounced actually moral relativism. For him, it was directly linked to moral relativism, the idea that moral principles have no objective standards. he has characterized it as the major evil facing the church. So he was stronger than Pope Francis, saying that this is the major evil facing the church today, moral relativism. And this can be unfortunately noticed in, I would say, some societies and so on. But this, it can also be something which prevents people from getting together, people from finally experiencing what solidarity means, what fraternity means, what social friendship means, and so on. Because social friendship may be, different from the way we experience friendship in our day-to-day lives and so on. It may be a bit different, but we are just invited to go beyond all of those experiences that we may already have, and to go on discovering, to go on growing finally, because we always grow. And in French, they say that l'oreille n'est jamais trop vieille pour apprendre, which means that the ear is never too old to learn. So until death, you will be able to learn new things. There is no time, there is no moment when you say, I am too old to learn. Until death, you may always be able to grow, to learn new things, and so on. And I like this saying, actually, l'oreille n'est jamais trop vieille pour apprendre, and which is actually true. So I said at the beginning that Pope Francis was not the first one to have ever talked about fraternity, about also the role that the religions play in building peaceful societies. You see that we live in places where you have lots of religions. Maybe you have also many people who do not practice any religion, but religions have to play an important role in the process of building a peaceful society. And since we also share a faith, I mean we believe, so we may be concerned, we may be invited to get involved in this process. And in some cities, it is even it is obvious to see those differences. In other cities, it's less. But I remember in Sri Lanka, for example, in the city of Colombo, the capital city of Sri Lanka, you go out, you have the chance of meeting many people from different religions. It is very obvious because you have Hinduism, Buddhism, and you may see people wearing garments that actually show from outside to which religion they belong. So you may see priests with their cassocks, you may meet Muslims, you may meet Buddhists and Hinduists and so on in the same city, and you may also see churches, temples, and so on. It is a very religious city because of that. I have rarely seen things like that, because in many countries, either Islam is in the majority or Christianity is in the majority. So you see most of the time people from the same religion, and then you have some minority groups that can be encountered. No, how do we say? Encountered. Yeah, encountered. It is not an easy word to pronounce. That can be met and so on. So, but taking into account this aspect is important, and Nostra Aetate is a declaration actually on the relation of the church to non-Christian religions. It has been proclaimed by His Holiness Pope Paul VI on October 28th, and today is October 29th, so it's almost the anniversary of this declaration. So in this declaration that I really like, I will read some passages and say something about it. It's actually the church invites us, invites everyone to not reject what is true and holy in the other religions. This is maybe one fundamental step in the process of building a peaceful society. Because sometimes you may say, okay, my religion is the best one. There is nothing good that can be found from the other religions. In that way, I think it is not a good start for a peaceful society. But the church said, this was in 1965, that we do not have to reject anything that is true and holy in the other religions. And this is, for example, a passage which says something about it. They say this: from ancient times down to the present, there is found among various people a certain perception of that hidden power which hovers over the course of things and over the events of human history. At times, some indeed have come to the recognition of a supreme being or even of a father. This perception and recognition penetrate their lives with a profound religious sense. Religions, however, that are bound up with an advanced culture have struggled to answer the same questions by means of more refined concepts and a more developed language. Thus, in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery and express it through an exhaustible abundance of myth and through searching philosophical inquiry. They seek freedom from the anguish of our human condition, either through ascetical practices or profound meditation, or a fight to God with love and trust. Again, Buddhism in its various forms realizes the radical insufficiency of this changeable world. It teaches a way by which men, in a devout and confident spirit, may be able either to acquire the state of perfect liberation or attain, by their own efforts or through higher help, supreme illumination. Likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. The Catholic Church rejects nothing that is true and holy in these religions. She regards with sincere reverence those ways of conduct and of life, those precepts and teachings which, though differing in many aspects from the ones she holds and sets forth, nonetheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men. Indeed, she proclaims and ever must proclaim Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. This is from John 14. In whom men may find the fullness of religious life, in whom God has reconciled all things to himself. The Church, therefore, exhorts her sons and daughters that through dialogue and collaboration with the followers of other religions, carried out with prudence and love, and in witness to the Christian faith and life, they recognize, preserve, and promote the good things, spiritual and moral, as well as the socio-cultural values found among these men. I found this passage really interesting because not only the Church says that we do not have to reject anything that is holy and true, that is positive, that can help to construct something good in the society. We do not have to reject them. We have either maybe to use them, we have to receive them, we have to consider them, to esteem them, and so on. But, and this is important, it does not prevent us from still announcing the truth. I mean, from still proclaiming Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. So you see, there are two things. And last time even I also said it at Mass, that yeah, we are all invited to receive the other people. We are not either saying that anyway everyone has their religion, this is good, so they are all equal, and yeah, just let's go on like this. There is no objective truth, and everything is equal, and so on. That is not what we are saying. We recognize what is true and holy from the other religions, and those things may not be expressed as we do in our religion, but we are still invited to proclaim Jesus Christ as being the way, the truth, and the life. We are still invited to testify. We are still invited to announce the gospel finally, while not rejecting at all what is from the other religions. And this is, I think, a good way of, I would say, living finally together while having some differences and so on. And this exhortation continues saying, we cannot truly call on God, the Father of all, if we refuse to treat in a brotherly way any man created as he is in the image of God. And this is also interesting. You cannot call on God if you refuse to treat in a brotherly, I would say also in a sisterly, I don't know if that word exists in English, but you understand what I mean, in a brotherly way, any man created as he is in the image of God. As we said at the beginning, the foundation of the fact that we consider everyone as being a brother, a sister is, the fact that we believe that God is the Father and he has created everyone. So if we have one Father, then we are all brothers and sisters. It is as simple as that. Even though sometimes it may not be obvious, it depends, but it has something to do with our faith, actually. And the declaration continues, man's relation to God the Father and his relation to men, his brothers and sisters, are so linked together that Scripture says, he who does not love does not know God. This is also interesting. He who does not love does not know God. It is from 1 John 4:8. So, no foundation therefore remains for any theory or practice that leads to discrimination between man and man, or people and people, so far as their human dignity and the rights flowing from it are concerned. The Church reproves as foreign to the mind of Christ any discrimination against men or harassment of them because of their race, color, condition of life, or religion. This is interesting. I would say it is a non-negotiable truth. The Church says no one should be actually discriminated because of their race, their color, their condition of life, their religion, and so on. No one should be discriminated based on that. And we have seen also in the past that some have fought against those kind of things, that maybe now exists less, and we have to be thankful for that, but that still exists. Maybe the way is different, but in some areas it may still persist, and that is why it is important to receive this encyclical and to profit from it, to take advantage of this, to maybe deepen more strongly those questions, those issues. And it says, on the contrary, following in the footsteps of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, this sacred synod, because it was linked to a synod, ardently implores the Christian faithful to maintain good fellowship among the nations, and if possible to live for their part in peace with all men, so that they may truly be sons of the Father who is in heaven. And this is, sometimes we may not have the opportunity of reading those documents and so on, but they are powerful according to me, and many people would be truly enlightened if they had the opportunity of receiving those messages, those documents, those declarations, and so on. That would have been great. So dialogue then is there to encounter the other neighbor, and there is also something which is interesting in the process of building a peaceful society. It is to evangelize the culture, evangelization of cultures. So we are from different cultures and so on, and we have to respect those differences. Last time we said that fraternity, universal love, does not mean that we are all the same, that there is no difference at all. We are not the same. Even though there exist objective references, but we still have our differences. We are from different areas and so on. We are not all the same, but we are invited to get together, to be united with our diversities, to not take them away, which would not be great at all, but to be united with our diversities. And for that, evangelizing the culture is also important. It is important to shed the light of the gospel in our lives, but on also what we are maybe traditionally used to doing. The light of the gospel is there to enlighten it, and the light of the gospel does not take away anything that contributes to the dignity of a person, of a human being. And that is why we always say, the popes say, do not be afraid of welcoming Christ in your life, because Christ does not take away from you anything that can contribute to your dignity and so on. Anything that is good, actually, Christ does not take it away from you, but he gives you everything that you need. So we do not have to be afraid of welcoming him into our lives, because he does not take away anything that is good, but he gives everything. Sometimes you may be, oh, my freedom. Maybe I won't be free anymore. I will lose my freedom. I will lose, I don't know what else. But he does not take away anything that contributes to your dignity and so on, but gives everything. So what is now God's love? Because we've been talking about fraternity, about charity also, because fraternity would have been impossible without charity. What is God's love? What does it mean? Is it possible to build a fraternal society without God's love? The answer may be obvious, right? Nay. No. And in the Bible, for example, St. John, in his first letter, invites people to love one another. Why? Because love comes from God. And everyone who loves is from God, begotten by God, and knows God. And that is also what we read in the declaration, Nostra Aetate. The one who loves knows God. The one who does not love does not know God either. So, it is important here to mention two things. Love comes from God, and more importantly, God himself is love. And those two things are together. So, it means that we do not lose anything by loving God above all and by loving our neighbor. So, by being a neighbor for someone else, there is nothing to lose by doing so. But sometimes, and we have to admit it, it is easier, right, to talk about love than to love truly. To talk about, to say things, to give a speech on charity, for example, is easier than to practice charity itself. You may find beautiful passages, you may find beautiful things on charity and sharing. This is very easy. But when it comes to really love, we may find it sometimes difficult. So it is also easier to talk about fraternity, about social friendship, than to get involved in the process of building fraternity, of building social friendship. So saying is always easier than doing. And that is why the example is what actually convinces most. When you speak, you are a good, you speak well, and you may, people may, I would say, be impressed, but the example is what attracts them, what leads them to imitate your example, to move. And the example is what makes people move. And that is why it is not easy. It is not easy, but it is important, actually. So we may find it difficult to practice charity in a genuine way, chiefly when it comes to love those who do not appreciate us, for example. Those who, not only they do not appreciate you, but they show that they do not appreciate you. And in some areas it is very obvious. Hatred may exist in some competitions, and it may be obvious, it may be even not hidden. People show that they do not appreciate you. And in that way, it is quite hard to, because spontaneously, what do we do? Spontaneously, when someone openly, for example, say, insults you or say, I do not appreciate you, go away, and so on, we are spontaneously also to give back the same reaction and so on. This is a normal human reaction. There is nothing bad in the fact of having that reaction spontaneously. But there is something bad in the fact of keeping that reaction. So it is a normal human reaction. It would be even a bit surprising when people insult you and you just laugh, okay, go on. This would have been a bit surprising and not normal. So we have to be aware of that. Normal human reactions. So humanly speaking, it is not that spontaneous that you may love your enemies, at least those you consider as being your enemies and so on. But God's commandment does not exclude anyone. In God's commandment, no one is excluded. Love one another. They didn't say love only your friends, love your classmates, love only your colleagues, love only your sisters, or or your brothers and so on. But everyone. So no one is excluded. So love without any exception. And this is actually what fraternity, social friendship, and universal fraternity is, love without exception. But we do not have to be blind. It may sometimes be difficult. And that is why we need God's grace, and that is why we need to talk about it. And yeah, we are not angels either. You know, angels, with, I don't know, those, we are not angels, we are human. And we will remain anyway human as long as we will be living on earth, at least. And we need to take all of those things into account and to ask ourselves the question, then what do we have to do to not fail to love our neighbor? If we've seen it is not easy, it is not that easy, what do we have to do to not fail? What do we have to do to still keep that commandment of charity finally, and to be, I would say, a peacemaker. And also in the Gospel according to John, Jesus gave some tips and answer to this question. He says, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Remain in my love. So this is, I would say, the recipe to remain in his love, to be able to love those who do not appreciate us. We are invited, first of all, to remain in Jesus' love. And how to remain in his love? We remain in his love by keeping his commandments. And this is also interesting too. Remaining in Jesus' love and keeping his commandments, those two things are linked. They are linked. The one who keeps the commandments is the one who loves. You can't love without keeping the commandments. Or the commandments, I would say, invites you, as we have already said, to love God above all else and to love your neighbor as yourself. But later on, Jesus gave a precision: love your neighbor as I have loved him. And this is also interesting. So remaining in Jesus' love is what we are invited to do, so that we may be able to go beyond, so that we may be able to overcome all of those obstacles, because obstacles exist in life. In Christian life, obstacles exist in life. We do not have to expect a life without any problem. And the Pope said, for example, we have to evangelize our problems. We may face problems in life, but what we have to do to evangelize, to shed the light of the gospel on our problems, to shed the light of the risen one on our problems, because there is no life without any problem. Even in Jesus' life, there are 4. There was before 3 groups of mysteries, but now 4. So you have the joyful ones, joyful moments. You have the luminous one, mystery of light. You have the sorrowful mysteries. And you have the glorious ones. To see that, even in his life, it was not only joyful moments. It was not only, everything is anyway great and no difficulty at all. It was not like this, but with God's grace, we can overcome. Then we can be stronger, finally stronger than those difficulties, and experience joyful mysteries, mysteries of light, maybe sometimes sorrowful mysteries, but surely glorious mysteries. So, and we are actually also invited to be friends with God finally. And this is a topic which is not that often enlightened, because in the gospel, what did Jesus say to his disciples? I do not call you my servants anymore, but I call you my friends. I call you friends, not servants anymore. So, friendship. We are talking about friendship, and here we see that friendship may exist also between Jesus and his disciples. Not only a relation of a boss with his servants and so on, but friendship, true friendship may exist between Jesus and his disciples. And this friendship is finally what helps to build friendship relationship with others finally. I think this is quite helpful, deeply helpful, in order to not only know what friendship is about, but also how to build it, how to make it greater finally. So Jesus said, I shall not call you servants anymore, I call you friends. Then what does friendship with God means? We can actually sometimes love God without actually being a friend of him. I don't know if this is obvious for you, but you may love God, many people love God, but they do not consider themselves as being friends. I mean, as being a friend of God. It's a bit obvious. It is a bit, weird, right? To see friend. Yeah, he is God, he is the Father, but how can he be my friend? This is maybe an image which does not speak that much. But since we believe in the incarnation and so on, we consider Jesus as a friend also finally. The saints are our friends in heaven, and we are, I would say, invited to consider them as our brothers, but also as our friends. Friendship and brotherhood are finally linked. Friendship and brotherhood, they are finally linked. And Jesus is also a brother, we may rightly say it. And invited to experience the friendship with Jesus, who came to us and make known to us everything he has learned from his Father. And this is what he said. Everything that I received, I have made it known to you. So the friendship with Jesus consists finally of receiving that, of opening our hearts so that we may receive this I would say this grace of coming to not only receive him but to know him. The one who does not love does not know God. So he is the one who made the first step, the one who took the initiative of coming to us, as he said. And he said, you did not choose me, I chose you. Since it's important to talk about this, because humanly speaking, it may be, as we have said, difficult to go beyond those differences, cultural differences, and so on, but with the grace of God, with God who made himself a friend of ours, finally, that is doable, that is possible, finally. And this is fundamental in the process of getting involved in building a peaceful world, finally. Not only a peaceful society, but a peaceful world. So this is one of the things that I had prepared for tonight. I wanted also to say something about the social doctrine of the church, but maybe you can take a small gap now. Is that a break, right? A gap, a break, yeah. We can take a break and then say something about the social doctrine of the church. Is that okay? Okay, let's take a break. So let's continue. The social doctrine of the church. And this is also a very powerful area, I think, and because it is at the service of human dignity, social doctrine of the church. And there are some principles in the social doctrine of the church non-negotiable principles, for example, the protection of life in all its stages, from the first moment of conception until natural death. This is one of the things that we may find in the social teaching, in the social doctrine of the church. Also, the recognition and promotion of the natural structure of the family, the protection of the right of parents to educate their children, and so on. These are non-negotiable principles that are in the social doctrine of the church. But first of all, the social doctrine of the church, what is it about, and why does it finally exist? I would say the principles that we find in the social doctrine of the church, they allow us, or they help us to make good discernments in our day-to-day lives. They enlighten actually how the society is organized, how even a company is organized, how any kind of structure is organized, and they give some elements, some values that can help build a human society everywhere finally. And the doctrine, the social doctrine of the church, is not there actually to think for us or to make decisions on our behalf, but it is there to give us some light so that our conscience may be enlightened. This is, I would say, the main idea, the reason why the church is involved in this area, to give you some steps to follow, to show you the way to follow, to enlighten your conscience so that you may by yourself make the decision. So it does not replace your conscience, because everyone has a conscience, everyone has the free will, and everyone is actually invited to follow his conscience and to use the free will to finally choose things freely. And the social doctrine of the church is there to help you, to enlighten, to help you, just to give you those steps to follow, to show you the steps to follow, and so on. And Pope Pius XII, for example, he gave a speech to the members of the Catholic Action in Italy. So this is a movement for lay people, and I think it existed in some countries, not only in Italy. But this Catholic Action in Italy, the Pope gave a speech, and he said something about unchanging, permanent, and compulsory principles that exist, and that, I would say, do not have to be changed, otherwise they would put our faith at risk. So then the doctrine of the church, the social doctrine of the church, we may say that it is a kind of current magisterium of the church, and it involves that the faithful may, I would say, accept it, they may show their adherence to it. So the mission of the church is the salvation of people. People, they are living in societies. People, they are living in organized structures and so on. If the church has the mission of finally bringing people or helping people to receive the salvation, if the mission of the church is the salvation of people, then she is involved in the way the society also is organized, because the man for whose salvation the church is, I would say, has been given the mission from Christ, those men live in societies. So the church is not there to talk about abstract men, but to talk about concrete men, those who live in concrete societies and so on. And this is actually interesting also here, because the social doctrine of the church insists a lot on solidarity, on human dignity, on those principles that are unchanging finally. Now in many areas they are trying to change them, but they are unchanging, they are permanent, if I had to say. And there are a kind of three dimensions, three foundations of this social teaching of the church. It is theological, historical, and also practical. So the three of them can be found in the social doctrine of the church. And here are, for example, some principles that are developed in this doctrine of the church, and that are good to actually spread, that are good to be spread and to be followed finally, to be also put into practice. So you have, for example, the principle of the common good, not a particular one. The common good also is at the service of the good of every person. So it is not something which is ideologic or ideological, but it is at the service of the good of every person. You have also the universal destination of goods, meaning that everything that exists actually is for everyone. It is not for only a few people. The universal destination of goods. That is why rich people are invited, for example, to share in different ways. So they are not compelled. They are not compelled to share, but just invited to realize that there is this principle of the universal destination of goods, that everything that exists has finally to profit to everyone. So it is a good value to practice solidarity, to be in solidarity with one another, to also finally follow fraternity and so on, because of one of the reasons is because of this fact also. And you have the principle of subsidiarity, which may exist most of the time, much more in companies and so on, subsidiarity. You have also the principle of solidarity, which is meaningful, which has something to do with moral virtue, which is at the service here also at the good of every person, because solidarity actually is finally at the center, if I dare to say, of the message of Jesus himself. Solidarity, charity, fraternal love, they are at the center of his message, and we are finally all invited to receive it. And I always say to not only receive, but to be able to put it into practice, which is actually a good way of building a society where freedom exists, true freedom, where justice exists, where solidarity exists, and as we said last time, where equality and liberty exist, but not without fraternity, because fraternity is what gives them their meaning finally. Otherwise, if you take away fraternity and then you fight only for freedom, you may not be able to experience true freedom. And if you take away fraternity and fight for equality, you may not really reach that true equality that is needed, that is linked finally to fraternity. And this is, I would say, interesting. And the doctrine of the church, the social doctrine of the church, may not be talking directly about fraternity. It says things about solidarity, but there is a link. There is a link between fraternity and solidarity, between friendship, social friendship and solidarity, and true solidarity, not solidarity which is there, for example, only to be profitable for one side and not for both sides. So, and this is possible with the grace of God. It is possible with the help of God, and I think we are invited to finally kneel down, to pray, to beg, and not only to pray, but to also cooperate. So praying and doing, the two of them go together. Praying and doing and praying, the two of them go together in this process, in this way of receiving the encyclical and of putting it into practice. So I will stop here, and thanks for coming and for listening, hoping that it helps us contribute to this process.